Indonesia is arming for war, but against whom? Indonesia is building one of the most interesting military forces in Southeast Asia. It is receiving modern Rafale fighter jets. It is strengthening its naval capabilities. And now Indonesia is preparing to receive a former Italian aircraft carrier, the Giuseppe Garibaldi. So the question is, why is Indonesia suddenly investing so heavily in modern military power? Indonesia is officially not preparing for war with any country. It follows a foreign policy of maintaining relationships with multiple powers. It has relations with the United States, it works with Europe, and it is also strengthening cooperation with China. But if Indonesia is friendly with so many countries, then why does it need advanced fighter jets, warships, and even an aircraft carrier? Who is Indonesia preparing to defend itself against? Is China the real concern? Is Indonesia preparing for a future conflict in the South China Sea? Or is something much bigger happening in the Indo-Pacific? Welcome to Knowledge Suitcase. Today, we investigate why Indonesia is rapidly modernizing its military and what threat Indonesia may actually be preparing for. The biggest symbol of Indonesia's military ambitions is the former Italian aircraft carrier Giuseppe Garibaldi. The ship previously served with the Italian Navy and has now become part of Indonesia's ambitious naval modernization plans. But there is something important to understand. This ship is not necessarily going to turn Indonesia into a traditional aircraft carrier power like the United States or China. Indonesia is not suddenly going to deploy massive fleets of carrier-based fighter jets across the Pacific Ocean. Instead, analysts believe the Garibaldi could initially operate helicopters and potentially unmanned systems. That could make it useful for maritime surveillance, helicopter operations, disaster relief, military transport, and operations across Indonesia's enormous maritime territory. But even with these limitations, an aircraft carrier is still a major symbol. It represents something important. Indonesia wants a more capable navy. And to understand why, we need to look at a map. The geography of Indonesia. Indonesia is not like most countries. Indonesia is one of the world's largest archipelagic nations. Its territory is spread across thousands of islands. Its land and sea territories stretch across an enormous distance. And this creates a serious military challenge. How do you defend thousands of islands? How do you rapidly move troops across huge distances? How do you provide air support to remote regions? And how do you protect sea lanes connecting the Indian Ocean and the Pacific? This is where naval power becomes extremely important. For Indonesia, the sea is not simply a border, the sea connects the entire country. And that means Indonesia's military modernization is not only about preparing to attack someone, it is also about being able to defend and control its own vast territory. But geography is only one part of the story. The second part is far more geopolitical. Whenever we talk about military modernization in Southeast Asia, one country inevitably enters the conversation: China. China is now one of the most powerful military powers in Asia. It has rapidly expanded its navy, it operates aircraft carriers, it is building advanced warships, and it has increased its military presence in the South China Sea. Indonesia is not officially an enemy of China. In fact, Indonesia and China have recently agreed to deepen cooperation in areas including defense, technology, and other strategic sectors. Indonesia continues to follow a policy of balancing its relationships with Beijing and Washington rather than formally aligning with either side. So why would Indonesia worry about China? The answer is the Natuna Sea and the South China Sea. Indonesia has experienced tensions and disagreements with China regarding maritime areas near the Natuna Islands. China claims almost the entire South China Sea through its expansive claims. Indonesia does not necessarily see itself as a party to all of the territorial disputes involving countries such as China, the Philippines, Vietnam, and Malaysia. But Indonesian maritime interests and China's claims have created strategic friction, and this creates a difficult situation for Jakarta. Indonesia wants good relations with China. China is an important economic partner, but Indonesia also wants to protect its sovereignty and maritime interests. So Indonesia's strategy can be summarized very simply: cooperate with China but remain prepared for uncertainty. Is Indonesia buying fighter jets and strengthening its navy specifically to fight China? The answer is probably not directly, but China is certainly part of Indonesia's strategic calculations. Indonesia cannot ignore China's growing military power. It cannot ignore tensions in the South China Sea, and it cannot ignore the possibility of a future regional crisis. Imagine a major conflict involving China and Taiwan, or a confrontation in the South China Sea, or rising tensions between China and the United States. Indonesia may not want to participate in such a conflict, but a major war in the region could still affect Indonesia's security. Shipping routes could be disrupted, trade could be affected, refugees could move across the region, and military operations could take place close to Indonesian waters. This is why Indonesia needs stronger capabilities. Indonesia may not be preparing to start a war. It may be preparing to survive one. Why is Indonesia buying Rafale fighter jets? Indonesia's modernization is not limited to naval power. Indonesia has ordered 42 French Rafale fighter jets, and deliveries have begun as part of a broader effort to modernize its air force. The Rafale is a major upgrade for Indonesia. It gives the country access to a modern multi-role combat aircraft capable of performing different types of missions. But the most interesting thing about Indonesia's military modernization is that Indonesia is not relying on just one country. Indonesia has historically operated equipment from different suppliers. It has relationships with the United States. It has purchased equipment from Europe. It has used Russian systems, and it has worked with South Korea on military aviation. Why? Because Indonesia does not want to become completely dependent on a single military supplier. This is extremely important. A country that depends entirely on one major power for weapons can become vulnerable to political pressure. Indonesia wants options, it wants flexibility, and it wants strategic independence. Indonesia's real strategy, strategic autonomy. This may actually be the most important part of the story. Indonesia does not want to become China's military ally, but it also does not want to become a military pawn of the United States. Indonesia wants to remain independent. Its traditional foreign policy is often described as free and active. In simple terms, Indonesia wants to cooperate with everyone but avoid becoming controlled by anyone. That is why Indonesia can conduct defense cooperation with China while also strengthening relationships with Western countries. That is why it can buy Rafale jets from France, and why it can simultaneously strengthen its own military capabilities. Indonesia is preparing for a world where the rivalry between major powers may become more dangerous. The South China Sea is changing everything. The South China Sea is one of the most important strategic regions on Earth. A huge amount of global trade passes through these waters. Several countries have competing territorial claims. China has expanded its military capabilities in the region, and the United States continues to maintain a major military presence across the Indo-Pacific. The Philippines is strengthening defense cooperation with the United States. Japan is increasing its military capabilities. Australia is investing heavily in advanced defense systems. India is becoming more active in the Indo-Pacific, and China continues to expand its military power. Indonesia is watching all of this. Jakarta may not want to choose a side, but in a future crisis, geography could make Indonesia extremely important. Indonesia sits close to major sea routes connecting the Indian and Pacific Oceans. This means Indonesia's security is directly connected to the security of the wider Indo-Pacific. Why does the aircraft carrier matter? So let us return to the Giuseppe Garibaldi. Why is this ship important? Because an aircraft carrier or a large aviation-capable naval vessel can provide something Indonesia desperately needs: mobility. Indonesia cannot defend every island using only land-based military bases. A mobile aviation platform can move helicopters, equipment, personnel, and potentially drones closer to distant areas. It could support disaster relief operations. It could help with maritime surveillance, and during a military crisis, it could become an important command and support platform. Analysts have suggested that the Garibaldi may initially focus more on helicopters, humanitarian operations, and potentially unmanned systems than traditional fighter-based power projection. So this is not simply about building a weapon, it is about building the ability to operate across a massive maritime nation. Who is Indonesia's real threat? So finally, who is Indonesia preparing to fight? There may not be one simple answer. Indonesia's military modernization appears to be driven by several concerns. Number one, defending its enormous territory. Indonesia has thousands of islands and huge maritime spaces to protect. Number two, China and maritime uncertainty. Indonesia may cooperate with Beijing, but it cannot ignore China's growing military power and regional claims. Number three, the possibility of a wider Indo-Pacific conflict. A war involving China, Taiwan, or the South China Sea could transform the entire region. Number four, strategic independence. Indonesia wants the ability to defend its interests without becoming completely dependent on the United States, China, or any other major power. And perhaps that is the real answer. Indonesia may not be preparing for a specific war against a specific country. Indonesia is preparing for an uncertain future. Conclusion: Indonesia's military modernization is sending an important message. The Indo-Pacific is becoming more competitive. The South China Sea is becoming more militarized. China is becoming more powerful. The United States and its allies are strengthening their presence. And middle powers like Indonesia are realizing that they cannot simply remain militarily weak and hope that geopolitics will not affect them. The Giuseppe Garibaldi aircraft carrier is therefore more than just an old Italian ship. The Rafale fighter jets are more than just new aircraft. Together, they represent Indonesia's attempt to become a stronger and more independent military power. Indonesia does not necessarily want war, but it clearly wants to be prepared, because in today's Indo-Pacific, the biggest danger may not be knowing exactly who your enemy is. The biggest danger may be not knowing where the next crisis will begin. So what do you think? Is Indonesia primarily preparing for a possible confrontation involving China, or is this simply a natural attempt by one of Asia's largest countries to become a stronger regional military power? Write your opinion in the comments below. And if you enjoy deep analysis of geopolitics, military power, and global strategy, don't forget to subscribe to Knowledge Suitcase.